Hello again. This is the second video that I'm posting this week. What happened is I was about 15 minutes into the previous one and I got a notice that my iPad was full and it couldn't store any more material beyond that. So I had to cut that off. I don't know if there's a way to continue once I deleted a bunch of stuff. If there's a way to continue with the same video. There probably is, and I don't know how to do that. But so having said that, I'm starting a second video this week, just picking up where we left off, okay? And when I send the email later, I will give you the two links. There will be two instead of one, okay? So we're just picking up 15 minutes into the video where we left off, okay? So we are up to preventing and managing distractions, and I was emphasizing the importance of preparation before you drive. Certain ways in which you can prepare. Number one, certainly be familiar with the vehicle you're driving. You know, many of you tell me when I give driving lessons that, you know, you drive your father's car and it's bigger, it's different than the one you drive in driver's ed, and you have to make adjustments, and that's true. Okay, so you always want to be very familiar with the car you're going to drive. Preset your radio and climate control. You don't want to be fidgeting around with those things, okay? Make sure items are secure. So you don't want something flying off the back window to the front, which can be dangerous in itself and obviously a distraction. Set your GPS before you move, okay, if you need it. Make sure you're not brushing your hair or doing any grooming while you're driving. If you have children in the car, and one day you'll all be parents, so you'll know this feeling. You've got little children in the car and they're distracting you. Pull over and deal with them. Don't try to deal with them while you're driving, okay? If you are using your cell phone, you're talking with a Bluetooth, which you know is legal. Always make sure the person you're speaking with knows that you're driving. You know, so you know, they're sensitive to the fact that you're, you know, doing something very important that requires your attention. And in that light, you know, you want to emphasize that the conversation really should be brief, okay? You don't want to get into an emotional conversation with somebody. You know, you're not breaking up with your boyfriend or girlfriend while you're driving. You're not having an argument with somebody, okay? Common sense, I think, all right? Let's talk about drowsy driving. And drowsiness is a very, very big factor in many collisions, okay? Meaning, of course, becoming tired, which causes the ability to drive to be impaired, okay? And, of course, then your risk of collision increases. One of the leading causes of collisions is drowsiness, and a few statistics that I'd like you to have at your disposal. 100,000 crashes in North America are caused by drowsiness. 100,000 crashes. Another statistic along those same lines, 1,550 people die every year in collisions caused by drowsiness. 1,550. 71,000 people are injured every year in collisions caused by drowsiness. 71,000. And financially, there are $125 billion in losses due to drowsy driving collisions. $125 billion in losses. So that really puts everything in perspective, okay? Another statistic I would give you is that 60% of adult drivers, that's about 168 million people, 60% of adult drivers, 168 million people, admit to having driven drowsy in the past. And 1/3 of those people admit to falling asleep while driving. So 60% of adult drivers, 168 million people, admit having driven drowsy in the past year, I should say the past year. My apologies for not mentioning that, which makes the statistic even more significant. And 1/3 of those people admit to falling asleep while driving. Now, in my lifetime, I've driven drowsy many times. Shouldn't, but I admit that I've done it. I've also fallen asleep while driving a couple of times on a very, very long trip. Fortunately, when that's happened to me, I've caught myself, I pulled over, nothing dangerous happen. But I should never have allowed myself to get to that point. And it's very scary when that happens, okay? Because you wake up and you nod off for a split second. You wake up and you're disoriented, to say the least. Sometimes, you've veered into another lane, or you've rolled off onto the shoulder of the road, and you hear the strips, the different traction that wakes you up, okay? So who is at risk? Obviously, drivers on long trips, drivers lacking sleep. And here's an interesting statistic. People who are driving with 6 or 7 hours of sleep, they've had, at night, you've had 6 to 7 hours of sleep, are twice as likely to be involved in a crash as those who have slept 8 hours or more. And that may not seem like a big difference, 6 to 7 hours versus 8 hours. But statistically speaking, it's a huge difference. People who are driving after having 6 or 7 hours of sleep the night before are twice as likely to have an accident than somebody who has 8 hours of sleep or more the night before. Okay, so the leap, the statistic shows a very big leap. Okay. Of course, drivers with undiagnosed or untreated sleep disorders are a great risk. The two most common, I should say the one very common, is sleep apnea. And many older people suffer from that. Okay, people who snore oftentimes have some form of sleep apnea. They're not getting enough quality sleep. And of course, there is, thankfully, this isn't nearly as common as sleep apnea, but there is the sleep disorder known as narcolepsy, where people have been known to, the disorder causes you to fall asleep, at any time, at any point in the day, and, may just come out of nowhere, okay? There are also low times, and for humans in general, the low times, meaning the times that we're more likely to be drowsy, are the periods of midnight to 6 a.m., and also 2 to 4 p.m., midnight to 6 a.m., 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., that late afternoon, and you've all felt it, I'm sure, that late afternoon kind of days that we get. You get to a point in the day, assuming, you've gotten up early, you've gone to school, you've worked all day, you get to between 2 and 4, and humans tend to be naturally a little drowsy during those times. And obviously, midnight to 6 a.m. And this is called circadian rhythm, the human being's circadian rhythm, CIRCADIAN, CIRCADIAN. And the circadian rhythm, then, we all follow a circadian rhythm, and that is the times of day. It involves the times of day when we're most alert and times of day when we are least alert. And that does differ from person to person, but the most common times that are down for most people are midnight to 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. based on our natural circadian rhythms. Couple of analogies that I think drive home the problem for drowsiness for drivers who have had extended periods of wakefulness. You've been awake for an excessive amount of time, okay? So, for example, if somebody has been awake for 18 hours and is driving, the effect on that person of extended wakefulness of 18 hours is the equivalent of having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%, okay? So you're almost drunk if you're driving after having been awake for 18 hours. Now, if we jump to 24 hours, there's a pretty big jump from 0.05% to 0.10%. So you're beyond the definition of drunk, okay? So again, if you're a driver who's been awake for 18 hours straight, driving after being awake for 18 hours straight is the equivalent of driving with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%. So it's not drunk, but it's, you're definitely under the influence. And the analogy for somebody who is driving after having been awake for 24 consecutive hours to the blood alcohol concentration level, the BAC, is 0.10%. So that person might as well be drunk. Okay? Young drivers, and those are drivers under the age of 30, are involved in over 2/3 of fall asleep crashes. Think about that. So drivers under the age of 30, that's yourselves obviously, are 2/3 more likely to fall asleep and cause a crash than somebody who is older than 30. Okay? And therefore so 2/3 of those drowsy accidents are caused by people under the age of 30. And if you're under the age of 30, statistically speaking, you are 4 times more likely to be involved in a sleep-related crash than somebody who is over 30. And again, that involves many factors. I guess that's the result of many factors. Experience, obviously, we always come back to that. Their circadian rhythms may be different for people your age versus people my age. The lives that we lead, etc. There may be many factors that go into that. But the important thing for you to know is that 2/3 of all sleep-related accidents are caused by people under the age of 30. And if you're under the age of 30, statistically speaking, you are 4 times more likely to be involved in a sleep-related accident. The other high-risk drivers are those who do shift jobs. If you worked, the overnight shift, or you work, you would do a double shift or a triple shift, and then you're driving. Obviously, you're increasing the risk of having a drowsiness accident. Other causes of drowsiness: emotional stress can cause you to be drowsy. Illness, as we know, if we're sick, we can be more likely to be drowsy. Boredom, you're on a long trip, and I've done this where, the scenery doesn't change very much and it's all straight driving, could cause drowsiness. Overeating can certainly cause us to be drowsy. Drinking alcohol, obviously. A car that's overly warm, and you know that if the temperature is very warm, wherever you are, you're more likely to doze off or to be drowsy, okay? So how to tell if you're at risk of becoming drowsy. Half of drowsy drivers involved in crashes did not detect any signs before the crash. Sometimes there are no warnings before falling asleep. So the point being that it is often difficult to detect those signs of drowsiness. Sometimes they come upon us very quickly, unexpectedly, okay? Half of all drivers involved in drowsy crashes didn't see it coming. They didn't pick up the signs that they were drowsy, okay? Some signs to pay attention to: obviously difficulty focusing, if you're frequently blinking, if your eyelids are very heavy, if you find yourself yawning a lot, if you find yourself rubbing your eyes a lot, those are some physical signs. If you find yourself daydreaming, or you're having disconnected thoughts, that feeling just before we fall asleep where things get a little hazy, okay? If you're having trouble remembering the last couple of miles that you've driven, if you find yourself missing exits or signs, obviously trouble keeping your head up. If you find yourself drifting into another lane, which is very common for drowsy drivers, or you find yourself following too closely to somebody, or again, drifting off to the shoulder and you hear that rumble strip, okay? If you're feeling restless or irritable, these are all signs that you are drowsy and that you need to pay attention. Preventing drowsiness, well, of course, a good night's sleep is the best way to prevent it. Adults, meaning people older than you, okay, non-teens, should be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night to avoid drowsiness. And people in your age group should be getting 8.5 to 9 hours per night. So you're expected to get a little more sleep than I am. Okay, the older you get, the better you function with less sleep. And sadly, You know, there are far too many people in your age group who don't get nearly enough sleep and have a difficult time functioning at all during the day, let alone driving. Always prepare your route carefully, okay? If you're going on a very long trip, it's a good idea to have a companion with you, somebody who can help keep you awake, maybe share driving with. And avoid medications that cause drowsiness. You know, use common sense, all right? There are things on the road that can cause drowsiness, such as glare, sun glare. And of course, the sun glare can cause eye strain, so it's always a good idea if it's sunny to wear sunglasses. As we mentioned before, avoid overeating, avoid heavy foods, okay? Be aware of your own circadian rhythm. Everybody's is maybe different in some way. Share driving, have a companion with you on long trips. And a little gauge for you to use. It's advisable if you're on a long trip, and this is something for you to remember. I think it's a good little thing to remember if you're going on a long trip. Every 100 miles or every 2 hours, you should be taking at least a 20-minute break. Okay, so every 100 miles or every 2 hours, which are about the same, you should make sure you stop and you take a 10-minute break. Okay, so that's a good rule of thumb. Some ineffective actions to avoid drowsiness. Trying to tough it out, never a good idea. Okay, putting your radio at a high volume is not a good idea, because while we may think it's keeping us awake, it might make us more jacked up. It might make us more drowsy and irritable or excited, which does, believe it or not, compound the drowsiness. Going at a faster or slower speed, not a good idea. Chewing gum does not help. Opening windows, getting that cool air in, doesn't help. Okay? We think it does, but it doesn't. Rest is key. That's it. Bottom line. Rest. Okay? Now, there are times when you're on a long trip where you may need to stop and take a nap. And some words of advice about that. Number one, you don't want to stop near the highway. Okay, you don't want to be just off the highway because cars, God forbid, somebody doesn't see you or you're in a vulnerable position. You want to stop near where there's security, where there's light. Okay, if it's after dark, you want to be in a populated, well-lit area, rest stop, a service area. Okay, before you take your little nap, give yourself a little outside air. All right, leave your window open a little bit so you don't have toxic fumes floating around in your car. Crack your windows then, but obviously not much. You don't want somebody to be able to get into your car. And thus you want to, of course, lock your doors. Always turn off your engine if you're taking a rest, okay? Always put up, wherever you are, put on your parking lights, your hazard lights, okay? The flashing lights directs people to you. They can see you better, okay? When you finish taking your rest, it's a good idea, assuming that you're in an area that's populated or where there's security, it's a good idea to get out and walk around for a few minutes to get the juices flowing, okay? Keep in mind, and we all know this, if you're taking a nap of more than 20 minutes, chances are when you wake up, you're more likely to be groggy. So it's a good idea if if you wake up and you realize you've slept, say, for an hour, I wouldn't jump right back on the road. Take at least 5 minutes to walk around, to get fresh air, to get rid of that drowsiness, okay? Emotions when driving. Emotions can have very negative effects on us as driving, strong emotions, and the most significant might be fear or anger, okay? So suppose you just received some bad news. You don't want to drive. Suppose you just had an argument with a family member or a spouse or, your boyfriend or girlfriend. You don't want to drive. You just played in or were a spectator in a game, a very close game that your team lost, and you're upset, you're disappointed, you don't want to jump in the car, okay? If you know there's going to be long lines of traffic, you might want to wait if you find that you're going to get angry or upset because of traffic. Our emotions do affect, of course, our ability to think, to reason, to make rational decisions. So again, be very careful about your emotions. Extreme emotions and driving do not go hand in hand, or that's not a good combination. Let's talk about aggressive driving and road rage. Aggressive driving, by definition, is when a driver operates a vehicle in a pushy or bold manner. Aggressive driving happens when a driver operates a vehicle in a pushy or bold manner. Some examples of aggressive driving: exceeding the speed limit, following somebody too closely, tailgating, failing to obey traffic controls, so you're not obeying stop signs or other signs, you're not obeying lights, okay? Making improper turns or maneuvers, okay? Making a U-turn where you're not supposed to, okay? Or making a sharp left turn, which is not necessary, or going into a turn too fast. Those are some examples of aggressive driving. Road rage, I think we all have experienced this. Road rage occurs when a driver uses the vehicle or some other weapon to threaten or cause harm to another roadway user in response to a traffic incident. So there's something happens and you look to behave in a threatening or dangerous way towards somebody else. And obviously, oftentimes the igniting factor for road rage is aggressive driving. You know, usually there's some form of aggressive driving that somebody does that ignites the road rage, that causes an escalation of emotions. Examples of road rage: throwing objects out of your window at somebody, yelling at roadway users, rolling down your window and yelling at them. Attempting to ram another vehicle, of course, is an extreme case of road rage. Some guidelines for controlling your emotions: understand your own emotional makeup. Some of us are more quick-tempered than others. Know what it is that affects your self-control, okay? Identify those situations when planning your trips. Always expect other drivers to make mistakes. If you expect the worst from other drivers, when those things happen, you're more prepared. Not only as a driver physically, but emotionally. Remember, emotions are contagious, and that's really true. If you're angry and you show that anger, you're more likely to get somebody else angry, okay? It's always a good idea to smile at people. With masks these days, that's difficult. But show courtesy. If somebody lets you pass, you know, on a narrow roadway, you know, give them a little wave, smile, okay? That goes a long way. Understand that when people do things that are stupid on the road, they're not personal, okay? So try to direct your emotions towards the action and not the individual. You don't know this person, and they're acting the way they are, not because they know you and they're trying to hurt you. They're just being stupid, okay? If you're upset, you know, somebody did something that upset you on the road, pull over. Take a little time to relax, take some deep breaths before you get back on the road. You may want to ask someone else to drive if you're that upset, okay? So preventing aggressive driving and road rage, avoid engagement. You know, if somebody is yelling at you or giving you the finger or whatever, just ignore them. Don't engage with them, okay? Don't give other drivers reasons to be aggressive. Give yourself plenty of time to get to a destination. Oftentimes, aggressive driving and road rage occur when, you know, people are pressured. You're going to be late for work or school. And so you drive aggressively and it escalates, okay? Listen to soothing music if you're upset. Don't follow too closely. Obviously, we don't want to tailgate. If you don't have to change lanes, don't. You know, lane changing is always an invitation for the potential for danger. Try to avoid lane changing as much as possible, okay? At the same time, don't block a passing lane. So if you're on a 3-lane street, you probably want to be driving in that middle lane if you're going, you know, if you're through traffic. The left lane is typically for passing. So if you're not passing, stay the heck out of it, okay? The right lane, as you know, is often where it is where cars enter the roadway. So maybe you can stay out of the right lane. If you're going to be driving for a while, stay in that middle lane, okay? Use your turn signals. Far too many people that we encounter here in Staten Island expect us to read minds. It's too much trouble to use the turn signal. Avoid aggressive or offensive hand gestures. Again, don't engage, okay? Use your horn sparingly. Don't use your horn aggressively. The horn is to be used when there's the potential for danger, all right? And that's it. So be careful of when you use your horn. Don't get happy with it. Don't take up 2 parking spaces. We see that all the time. You go into a strip mall and somebody is parked right on the line and you can't park, okay? Use your high beams correctly. In most places in Staten Island, you don't ever need your high beams. They're only meant to be used on a dark road at night, okay, country road. If you do have your high beams on, make sure you turn them down when there's oncoming traffic. Try to avoid, as I said, the right lane. Try to avoid the left lane unless you're passing, okay? Other drivers that are aggressive or enraged, as we've said, don't engage with them. Avoid escalation. Always try to remain calm. Take a deep breath. Don't make eye contact with them. You know, somebody's yelling at you through their window. Somebody's giving you the finger. Don't even make eye contact. Keep your eyes focused on the road, okay? Try to be tolerant and forgiving. Very hard to do. But if you are tolerant of others, then we're more likely to de-escalate a situation. As we said before, be polite and courteous. Somebody lets you pass or does something that's nice. Smile, give them a wave, okay? Always give yourself an out. Try to have enough space around your vehicle where, if God forbid somebody tries to cut you off or block you, you have an escape route. Never get out of your vehicle, okay, when there's a situation like this, okay, where there's an engagement of emotions. And obviously, if there's an emergency, pull over, call 911. And if you ever feel threatened, then 911 is the way, or pull over to an area where there are witnesses, where there are people. Hit your horn so you draw attention to yourself, okay? These are ways to protect yourself, okay? And so the bottom line is avoid conflict at any cost when you're driving. Okay, folks, that's it. So like I said before, there were 2 videos. I'm sorry about that, but I'm going to upload both on YouTube, and I'll give you the link. And I'll give you both links, and you can take it from there. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the Super Bowl.